Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Megan Taylor Morrison, and I am here today with Jan Keck, a man who is dedicated to making people feel less alone. And Jan, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about what you do in the world.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm super excited about our conversation because I already have a little bit of a heads up of where I think we're going to go, but who knows what's going to happen. So my world evolves all around helping people get from small talk and surface level conversations to really deep conversations and connections. And it started with more of a product. I created these cards that help you kind of go deeper by asking deep questions. They're actually called Ask Deep Questions. And then evolved into running experiences, workshops, training other people how to facilitate connections, and now virtually and in person as well.
I love that. And let's talk a little bit more about the way that you've spent your career providing people with the tools and skills to feel these deep, meaningful sense of connection. What lights you up most about connection?
So I still feel like I'm pretty new when it comes to professionally working about like with facilitating connections. My background is actually in video production. And I've always felt there was a bit of a similarity because what lit me up about video production, and I wanted to be a documentary filmmaker in the beginning, was capturing those moments where people are real, where they show some emotion, they have a transformation and the camera captures it, but people are not aware that they're being filmed. Those always were, to me, the most powerful moments. And if then somebody would watch them, they would have like an emotional reaction to seeing that, or hearing somebody share their story, seeing them like have this moment in front of the camera. And over the last few years, especially with using the cards, I basically removed all technology because I believe that these things that we all have in our pockets are probably one of the biggest obstacles in connecting with each other. So having something that is completely analog, doesn't need batteries, doesn't need Wi-Fi. We actually put our phones away, we touch something and have a conversation. We can make eye contact. I felt that is really one of those things that I needed to recreate because I was craving that myself. And if I may, I can share a little bit of the story. You might have heard that I have a little bit of an accent. Like I grew up in Germany. I now live in Canada, but I've been here now for 13 years. And when I first moved here, I didn't know anyone. And I had to build my own network, my own community once I got here. And in the beginning, first few years, it was a lot of networking events that I did not enjoy. I was not having a great time at networking events. I also would say that I was not the most outgoing person. I was probably a lot more introverted. And it wasn't until maybe 6 years of living in Canada when I attended this one retreat that turned my whole life around. Like it was one of those moments that I will probably tell that story of that moment to my grandkids, because after just 3 days of spending time with, it was 30 people working on personal goal setting away from the city, where actually I didn't have reception, so I had to turn off my phone. That was gone, but people being so much aligned with them and like our values of like personal growth and just like the value of community and connection. I now describe it as having almost like a spiritual experience on the last day, where I was looking around the room and everybody was saying goodbye to each other and giving each other hugs. I literally could, not literally, but I imagined what it felt like is the energy bouncing around in the room, kind of like the Care Bears shoot those rainbows out of their bellies. That's kind of what I visualized in that room, and that was so impactful to me. And for like days, weeks afterwards, I tried to figure out, wow, what happened in those like 3 days? Why did I have this complete sense of belonging with this group of strangers that I didn't know until I arrived? And it was a lot about sharing vulnerable stories with each other and being outside of our comfort zone, but feeling supported to go there. And those are still like the main things that I think of when I'm now designing my own experiences, is like, how can I recreate the magic that happened there now again for my own participants?
I love that. Was this right after you arrived to Canada, or a little while after you arrived? When did that take place?
That was like after I lived here for 6 years. So it took a long time. And I often say that I found my community at that weekend, and most relationships that I had until this point were probably pretty surface level. I did not know that I was craving those deep, meaningful connections until I realized what it actually feels like. And I think a lot of people walk through life kind of on autopilot, a little bit like a zombie. Like, we're not so much so self-aware. We don't pay attention to all the things, especially the things that are missing out of our lives. And I noticed that once I had it, I'm like, that I want that more. I want more of those people in my life. How can I try to re-engineer what happened so I can get more people, attend more experiences like that?
It's always been amazing to me how experiences that are well facilitated or led can create that sense of connection right away. What are some of your favorite ways to get a group really connected right from the get-go?
Yeah, actually, I have two things that I want to share here. Now that I'm remembering that event, they had something that I now would call an unofficial start activity, which is maybe the most important aspect of any event, because it basically is the half hour in person, maybe 10-15 minutes online, when everybody's trickling in. And as you know, you've attended events, you've hosted parties, not everybody shows up at the same time. So if you say the event starts at 7, people might show up 15 minutes early, they might show up on time, they might show up 15 to 30 minutes late. And I always now like to think of what's an activity that I can give every single person as they're coming in, so they have something to do and they're not just standing awkwardly in the corner, not wanting to talk to anyone. And looking again at my own experiences, I've attended a lot of networking events where I just see a sea of people, and I'm not excited to like walk up to a group of people, wait until like there's a pause to introduce myself. Like, all the thoughts are popping up in my head of like, what if they don't even make eye contact? Like, at what point do I just leave because they don't seem to welcome me? And as soon as you give your participants this activity, and I'll share some examples, the playing field for anybody who is maybe more extroverted and outgoing, and the people who are more introverted and socially anxious, kind of levels. So at that event that I attended, they had us color our name tags. So the name tags were there, and you could, I don't remember if they had them printed or if you just wrote your name tag, and they had stickers and colors and you could just color it in. And while I was doing that, I started chatting to the person sitting next to me at the table, and we hit it off, and then the next person joined and we started talking, and I started making connections from the moment I walked in the door. Would have been totally different if that activity wasn't there. And the great thing is, if you arrive 15 minutes early, you can engage in it. If you arrive 15 minutes late, you still can engage in it. And nobody feels left out in a way. Yeah, and I would say it's the same thing virtually. Although there, I would say almost nobody arrives early unless you tell people that it starts, like they're allowed to join early. Most people arrive like on time, 5 minutes later to 10 minutes later, I would say, from my experience. But even there, the official start in my events, I don't plan until 10 minutes in, because I want those first 10 minutes to be everybody arriving and having something to do so they get more comfortable with the group, with the environment, and then we get started. So I oftentimes do things like guess the movie or TV show tune, where I play different songs and people answer in the chat. If it's a really large group, that's great, because they can just use the chat. If it's a smaller group, I might do some virtual coloring with the annotation feature in Zoom, just to help people calm down if it was like a heavy day. Like, I know this week, especially for anybody who lives in the US, has been a heavy week. So I've been doing a lot more like calming activities in the beginning rather than something that is super high energy.
Great suggestions. I've never heard of that it's Zoom annotation where you can color things.
Yeah, well, with the annotations, anybody can draw on your slides or on the whiteboard. Mm-hmm. And I just upload or have one slide that has a blank coloring page. And everyone can just start coloring different hearts and flowers. And oftentimes I also write like some kind of quote or text in the middle that is relevant to the event.
I love that. I love that. We used to do something similar at our Authentic Relating game nights. We'd lay out posters on the floor that said like, what did you want to be when you grew up, or this or this or that? So I can imagine it's something similar that you do. What are some of the prompts that you give people when they come in?
Yeah. So the other thing that I do often is I actually use my Ask Deep Questions cards, because there's 3 different levels. So there's curious questions, then there's brave, and then there's vulnerable questions. And the idea is that the curious questions are the ones that you should always start with. If you're thinking of conversations as having a surface level type of conversation, and then there being a huge iceberg on the bottom that mostly is covered in the water, this would be just below the surface. So already getting to some more personal things, like I'm just reading one of them. How have your priorities changed over the years? Or what does the word home mean to you is one of my favorite questions of the deck. And I would just hand a card to each person as they come in, tell them, find somebody that you don't know and have a conversation based on the cards. Like you can choose which one you want to talk about.
I love that.
So that's something super simple that, like I always have these cards with me. So that's the one that I have in my back pocket when I can't think of something that is necessarily related to the theme of an event.
And I imagine that you've done so many different events and had to work with so many different types of groups that you're innovating pretty regularly. So how do you test a connection exercise or a technique before you take it in a group to make sure that it works?
So when I read this question, I was actually chuckling to myself, because I'm like, should I be testing things before I put them in a group? Because my tests usually happen at an event. Like I have this, maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. I get bored very quickly if I do the same thing every time. So even though when I have something that works, I want to change it a little bit so it stays interesting for me, so I'm not doing exactly the same thing and repeating myself every time. So I experiment probably at every single experience or event with at least one thing that I've never done, or one way that I've never done it before. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I think it depends on it depends on the group for sure. Like I wouldn't do it with any group. Like if I work with organizations and it's corporate and there's a lot of money involved and lots of stakeholders that are attending, I might be less experimenting than if it's a group of individuals that signed up for like a free session. But yeah, I oftentimes run experiments and try new things.
Do you have a favorite or worst memory of a time that you did that?
I think there's a lot of things that happen that are so small that I don't really remember them. And because I oftentimes set it up like telling everyone, like I'm not pretending that I've done this hundreds of times and it's going to work. I'm going to tell everyone, hey, we're going to do this activity. In my head, it's going to be super amazing and I'm really excited for you to try it out. But it also could horribly fail. And I like just in the beginning of events have some kind of community agreements as well. And one of them is that we are supporting each other to do something uncomfortable. And I'm going to step outside of my comfort zone at my own events to, I guess, lead by example as well. So me running an activity, not knowing how it's going to go, is kind of in the spirit of that agreement. And yeah, in terms of examples, I think one thing, especially with virtual experiences, is when I do breakout room activities or any activity with a small group and you have to come up with an order, like who goes first. I always like to give people their instructions so we can save that time. Like you're not getting to a breakout room and then you're having chit chat and then you're going to figure out, okay, do you want to go first? No, should I go first? And then people spend like minutes before they even get to the activity or the conversation. So I always like to come up with new ways to give them like who goes first. And I've definitely tried some that I found online that were cringeworthy and made me regret that I said it right after. And also learning what is like a safe one, which like I love saying whose name comes first in the alphabet, or whose birthday is coming up next. Those are really easy ones, safe ones. I used to do one that I don't do anymore, which was person with the shortest hair goes first, which oftentimes would be me. But also it could make people feel really uncomfortable if they have like if there's any if they feel a little bit, what's the word that I'm looking for? Self-conscious about their hair. So I stopped using that, but then I found this list of things that also had that on it and a bunch of others. And one day with a small mastermind group, it was only 6 of us, I decided, let me just pick a random one. And the one that I landed on was, who went to the dentist last? And as soon as I said it and nobody wanted to like respond, I'm like, oh, I should probably just say something else. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm really curious to see what happens if I don't. So we stuck with it, and it was awkward. Not going to try it again.
I love that. Well, tell us about a time when, let's say, connection got blocked in some way, or you weren't able to achieve it. What happened, and what did you do to write the course?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the one thing that I learned actually at that retreat, there was one quote that kind of stood out for me and became kind of my mantra right afterwards, which was, your vibe attracts your tribe. Meaning that if you are yourself and you have that sense of belonging where you can be yourself without having to change who you are within a group, then you're going to attract the people that resonate with it. And you're not going to resonate with everyone. So even if at my events I want to facilitate connections, I know that not everyone is supposed to connect with everyone. And there are moments where it's not the activity, it's not my fault, it's not their fault, it's just two people they're not on the same vibe. But challenging is especially virtually when you can't even tell if somebody is there. Like in person, that would never happen. But I've had, like this is one example that happened actually last week. I was facilitating a networking session at an online conference. And I think they introduced it maybe not correctly of what they should expect. But as soon as people joined the Zoom meeting, everybody's video was off. And there were maybe 30 people with videos off. And I just started doing my guess the song game to get people like answering in the chat. And I could see there was activity in the chat, like people were there. And I started inviting them like, hey, if you can see me, give me a wave. If you can hear me, give me a wave. So I know that my audio is working. That's like my little cheat of like getting them to turn on the video to help me out. And hopefully that got a few people like turning on their camera, but not everyone. And I just started going into my different rounds of activities in breakout rooms. And the challenging thing is I did not know if people didn't want to turn on the camera because they're afraid of how they look, where they are, slow internet. Like there's many reasons why they are not turning on their camera, or if they're not sitting in front of their computer, maybe there is nobody there. Maybe just clicked the link and then walked away to get lunch. And that's what I think actually happened to a few of the people. So when I sent everyone to breakout rooms, there was this awkward moment of people being by themselves with other just black squares and nobody there. And luckily, I've had this experience happen to me before. So I quickly thought, okay, let me not run activities in pairs where the chance is quite big that one of the people is gone. Let me do groups of 3 or 4. So at least the chance that 2 people out of the 4 can have a conversation. And the black square is just there. But it's not the same because especially if you want to share something a little bit more vulnerable and you're not sure if there's a person just listening, and you can't see them and you don't know what they might be thinking, you're not going to share as much as without. So it was challenging. Luckily, the session was not one where we went super deep, and because it was networking at a conference, people kind of dropped in and they left again. And the one good thing that came out of it, where I knew, okay, I think it's working for the people that are engaging, is we had a second session later in the afternoon, and all the people that had their cameras turned on in the first one came back, plus a few more that then also had their cameras on. And the second time around, they turned on the cameras from the beginning. So I think that really helped me feel a little bit more confident, because if the second session would have been the same, I did not know if I did a good job, if people had a good time, because that's the other challenge in breakout rooms. You can't really get a sense of the room. Like, you can't walk around and hear conversation and read people's body language and facial expressions. You kind of have to assume that what happens in breakout rooms is working, and then have them check in when they come back. So I do a lot of like, give me a thumbs up, like type something in the chat, those types of check-ins to make sure that we're on the right track.
Those moments as a facilitator when we hit those challenges are such great learning opportunities as we look back on them. And I'm curious if you could have done it all over again. Is there some way that you might have set it up, or a question you would have asked the organizer that might have had it gone differently? Totally.
And this was kind of a unique case because it was kind of short notice. So there wasn't a lot of time to set it up. Plus, it was a large organization that was running it, and they were super stressed about doing their first virtual conference. And I was kind of brought in last minute because they were just going to have like an open Zoom link for people to network. And I'm glad that they didn't do that, that they brought me in to facilitate something. But what I would love to do is actually, and I did this for some team building and kind of custom trainings that I ran, where I record a short video message that is sent to the participants. So number one, they get to know who I am. So I'm not a stranger when they join. They get to hear a little bit of the expectations of what's about to happen, so they're not completely surprised. Plus, I'm going to make sure to tell them that this session requires you to engage, interact, and have your video on. And of course, again, for this, I know this was not sent, and I'm not even sure if half of the people knew that, because it was also happening during lunch hour. I think a lot of people, like I said, just hit the link and then went to grab lunch and had it on in the background.
Yeah. I love that idea of sending a video. That is such a cool idea. I haven't heard that before. Getting creative, sending videos, figuring out Zoom breakout rooms. There's so many ways that the pandemic has challenged us as leaders. What are some of the ways that you've had to grow due to the pandemic?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that this is like one of the biggest obstacles in helping people connect. And I actually dug this up from my closet. At my in-person events, I oftentimes use like these envelopes where we create a cell phone sleeping bag, so we can put our phone in, seal it up, and that way we can focus on connecting with each other. We're not distracted. At my retreats, I also put a wax seal on it, and I had people like have their phones in there for 3 days and not take them out. And it changes the way people are present with each other. And that to me is the biggest challenge, and the reason why I wasn't sure if I'm even going to attempt doing anything online in the beginning. Because once you are on a computer, like we're using that right now, there's two things. One is, I'm not sure if you're on social media and just like pretending to like nod your head and be interested and listening to what I'm saying, or if you're actually listening. And that itself means I need to create a space where we as a group agree that we are going to be present, that we are going to close other tabs, so that we're going to put our phone in the drawer, that when we're engaging with each other, we actually are present and we're asking follow-up questions and we're practicing our deep listening skills and all of those things. And the other challenge is all around eye contact. And I know that's something that Sarah and me talked a lot about, is to me, eye contact is one of the quickest way you can connect with someone in person. Virtually, that doesn't really work, because either I'm looking at the screen, like I'm looking at your eyes right now, or I'm looking at my camera, and now you feel like I'm looking at you, or anybody that's watching is now thinking I'm making eye contact with you. And that little difference is actually having a huge impact in how much you trust someone, how much you feel like connected to someone else. And again, in person, I do this activity where I have people partner up, and one person have to look at the other person's ear or their forehead, like just like inch or two off from their eyes. Doesn't seem like a lot, but when you ask for a debrief later, everyone says that that has been like they've been receiving the eye contact in the wrong place, that they, again, like this person's shifty, they're up to something, but they were having a like normal conversation. So it does have a huge impact. And I wish there was a way to make this easier for people to make eye contact. And I've then run some experiments where we did a virtual eye gazing experiment where I asked some volunteers to make eye contact with the lens. I would spotlight them so everybody else can see them full screen, play some quite emotionally charged music, maybe even some cheesy love songs, and have the rest of the group make eye contact with them on the screen, and then see how does that impact you. And I would say that was maybe one of my top 2 moments of facilitating something early on in the pandemic, where I realized, I think it's possible to create some really impactful, transformational, memorable moments where you feel so connected to the other person that you completely forget that you're using a computer, that you're looking at a screen. And I've been able to replicate that with every group, because it's unusual, and there's probably a lot more research behind it that I haven't been able to find of simulated eye contact is as good as real eye contact. The only challenge is it only works one directional. So if I'm looking at the lens, I'm feeling totally disconnected. I have to almost, and I give people the prompts, like, think that you're talking to a close friend or like somebody that you love, and like try to send that energy, kind of like the Care Bear, send that energy through the screen so it arrives on the other end. So I'm totally disconnected while pretending to connect, and the other person, you on the other hand, would receive something that feels as real as me making eye contact with you. And I've tried it. I've used that in like dating events, and I totally think that some people thought that they're falling in love with the other person, and the other person was just pretending to look at someone. So it's never the same, but I think in terms of creating that impactful moment, it totally works.
Yeah. Let's change gears a little bit, because I know that you as a leader have also ventured into the world of e-commerce. And I imagine a lot of leaders out there wonder, how can I package my brilliance and create an e-commerce product? What advice would you give to folks?
And when you talk about e-commerce, like I have physical products and then I have digital products as well. Should I talk about both? Or yeah.
Give us all you got.
Yeah, I shared this earlier that for me, my business actually started with a physical product. So I created these cards in the beginning, and not even planning of like creating a product. It was more like I wanted to, after that retreat, I wanted to experiment with creating experiences for other people. And one of the first ones I did was take a group of friends and strangers for I think it was 3-day backcountry camping trip where we went canoeing like a few hours north of Toronto, away from technology, so we can focus on connecting with ourselves and nature and each other. And I was worried about the car ride getting there, being either everybody on their phone or not talking to each other, or it could be the beginning of this beautiful experience. And that's where I created the first deck of cards for, thinking this is the only application, the 3 hours car ride. But then the cards became such a hit that we used them around the campfire and in the canoe and on the way back. And people said, hey, can I borrow this for a workshop next week? Can I borrow this? I have like a family gathering coming up. And that's how I knew that I was onto something. And even so, here's one really good tip for creating any type of product, which was get the community involved in creating it. I did not then go and say, okay, let me order 10,000 decks and start selling them. I said, okay, I already know that some of the questions work well and some didn't. Let me do a lot more play testing. So for maybe 2-3 months, I hosted 2 or 3 gatherings a week with different friends, strangers, where we just used the cards, and I would get feedback at the end. And I would kind of mark on the cards, okay, this was a good question, this was not a good question. I went from 75 that I had pre-selected to 48, and then changed some of the questions afterwards. And only then I had my launch event. And for that, I ordered 200, I think 300 decks. I put stickers on each box myself. I organized them for each box, which was a lot of time. My wife helped a lot with that. And then once I sold them, I did another order. And only a year after that, I did my official Kickstarter campaign, which then led to a bunch of media, and it started to grow from there. So I didn't kind of go all in from the beginning. I kind of scaled it slowly up, making sure that I have something that people actually find useful and that are interested in. And everybody that attended one of those playtesting sessions, I think, ended up either sharing or participating in the Kickstarter. And it wouldn't have been successful without that. I even created a Kickstarter launch group on Facebook where I basically created a community of people that are going to share the Kickstarter page on the day it gets launched. And I was able to do one post, and then there were 40 other people who did a post. So we basically raised 50% of the goal within 24 hours.
Wow.
And I only did one post. So it shows that if you get the community involved and they actually want to be a part of this.
It almost sounds like an unintentional MVP, a minimum viable product that you created for this camping thing. And then it proved the demand was there. So you were able to follow the demand. Yeah,
exactly. Sorry, I just had to adjust my lighting because it's starting to get dark early here. Yes, minimal viable product, that's all what it's all about. And thinking of launching digital products, and one of the things I've actually launched 3 things. 3 things? Well, two and a half this year, which was I started hosting my own virtual experiences. Then I started running workshops, teaching other people all the things I've learned from my experiments. And then after doing a bunch of workshops, I just started doing a survey saying, hey, I'm putting together a training. We will go even more into depth on the topics that were discussed in the workshop. If you can just fill out the survey, I'll give you half an hour of my time where you can ask me anything. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll get 20 people fill it out. I got 80 people fill it out. And luckily, not all 80 people booked a half an hour call because that would have been crazy.
Yeah.
But I asked them, okay, what do you want this training to include? Then I put together a page saying this is what it will include based on what you said. Are you interested? Then they signed up. Then I created it. And now I'm launching the second round with the testimonials I got from the first round. And the same thing I did again. There were 3 things that I launched. I also did a mastermind group the same way. And I did just launched a membership as well for people who are facilitating deep connections. And it was always the same process. And the funny thing is that the initial group, 4 of the initial 6 people mastermind have been part of everything else as well. So I've gotten to know people. I really know what specific things they need so I can create something for them and really scale the impact that not only I'm having in helping people. Again, my mission is help people feel less alone, but they're doing it in their own way. So it's like this snowball effect where we can reach so many more people this way by sharing the knowledge, sharing the ideas, rather than everyone working by themselves and feeling like we're competing for the same audience.
That's such good business. Ask what people want, test it, see if people actually sign up, and then create it. Saves so much time and allows you to create things that really serve people and that you know they want. I just want to high five you through the screen.
I've done it the other way around, so I've learned my lesson the hard way.
Yeah.
Creating an online course for 1 year, filming videos, editing videos, and then when we put it out to people, it was like, so does anybody want to buy this?
Yep. I feel like we all have those horror stories. So let's wrap up with a question about resources. What resources would you recommend to people that want to improve their leadership or facilitation skills?
Yeah. So when you asked me that question earlier, I asked you, well, like my own resources or the resources that I go to. And I think I want to give a shout out to 2 people who are doing some really amazing things online, especially in the last few months with there being more challenges of still engaging people and facilitating connections online. But also I have a virtual facilitator training that probably is going to launch again after this summit happens in 2021, where I'm sharing a lot more the details of, how to create this inclusive space, psychological safety, so people can connect with each other and then lay the foundation for everything else, like work better together, be more efficient. But the 2 people that I want to give a shout out to one is Chad Littlefield. I don't know if you know him. From his company is We and Me. And he also has a card product where I actually feel like we're kind of the same person, but in 2 different ways. He also became a dad recently, and I think our kids like a year apart. But the thing that he's really invested a lot of time and energy in is his YouTube channel. So if you look up Chad Littlefield, We and Me on YouTube, you'll find a lot of videos. He's posting like 1 or 2 every week right now around making presentations more engaging and interactive without using PowerPoint, which actually was one that I loved to watch just yesterday. And a lot of really cool ideas, and very engaging guy. The other person is, if you look up the YouTube channel, it's called The Magic Sauce. The guy's name is Yuri, and I have not met him in person yet, but I hope to see him at one point in person if we can. But he's also creating some really cool videos, sharing tips for in-person facilitation and virtual facilitation. So those are like the 2 channels that right now are on my notifications on the top. Like whenever a new video comes out, those are the 2 that I make sure to watch.
What do you love about each of them? What's your favorite thing?
I think both of them are just so relatable and so down to earth. Like they're not pretending to be a huge company, and both of them really focus on connections. I know for Chad, like their whole mantra for the company is connection before content. And that's something that I use all the time as well. And they have a card product. So like I said, there's just so many. When we connect on a one-on-one call, we could talk for hours. And I think it would be the same with Yuri if we had a chance to connect at one point. But yeah, both of them use humor really well. And they're really good at just being present on camera and editing it together in an interactive, engaging way, because there's also lots of videos out there that are just really boring to watch, and maybe they're really long before you even get to the nuggets. And I think both of them have quite short videos that get you there's no fluff.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Jan. It was such a joy to talk with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to this. I'm excited to check out some of the other sessions and hear from the other facilitators.